The wind in Missouri can cut you in September, but that morning the smell was sharper than the air. Gunpowder, blood, manure, wet grass, and the kind of sweat you get from sleeping in the same filthy shirt for a week straight. We're a long way from the Hollywood version of Jesse James here. In the movies, he's a dashing outlaw, spotless hat, guns flashing, never so much as a stain on his coat. But the real Jesse James in 1864, 17, hungry, already up to his elbows in the kind of violence Hollywood has never dared to fake. This is the chapter almost nobody covers. Before the train robberies, the headlines, the dime novels, before Robin Hood of Missouri was even whispered, Jesse was just a teenager on a battered horse, trailing Bloody Bill Anderson's gang into Centralia, and he was about to help pull off one of the nastiest, most revolting massacres of the entire Civil War. If you think you've seen gunfights on screen, trust me, you haven't felt blood drying into your hands like copper glue, or the way the stench of fresh death lingers long after the last gun smoke drifts away. So how does a preacher's son from Clay County end up here, riding out before sunrise? Every muscle sore, eyes gritty, stomach empty, and heart already hardening in ways he can't name? It's not just about the mind, it's about the body. Jesse's boyhood wasn't some faded family photo. His father died young, leaving Jesse's family, slave owners, like so many in Little Dixie, to scrape by while Missouri collapsed into guerrilla warfare. Union soldiers raided the James farm, whipped Jesse, tortured his stepfather, and made sure every Confederate-leaning family in Clay County learned what fear tastes like. Jesse and his older brother Frank weren't called to violence by legend. They were shoved in at bayonet point by a war that made revenge feel like breathing. That's the setup for Centralia. The James brothers rode with Anderson, a guerrilla so feared his nickname was practically a threat. The men around them, bushwhackers, not soldiers, didn't play by rules. They weren't just sniping from the woods. These guys captured, executed, mutilated. In Missouri by 1864, the rules of war were already out the window, replaced by a logic that was mostly blood and rage. On the 27th of September, 1864, Jesse and Anderson's gang closed in on the tiny railroad town of Centralia. They weren't there for drama or payback alone. They wanted food, boots, guns, anything they could strip from the Union Army or its unlucky supporters. The town woke up to the thunder of horses, shouting, "Gunfire!" Jesse, by every reliable account, was right in the thick of it. A skinny, filthy teenager in torn homespun, clutching a borrowed pistol, face still too young to hide what killing felt like. The physical reality was immediate and overwhelming. The gang stopped a train and forced over 20 unarmed Union soldiers off, lining them up in the dirt. And those executions, they weren't fast or quiet. Close-range gunshots, bodies dropping in the grass, the first sprays of blood slashing through the smoke. Some shot in the face, others in the back. Many left writhing and gasping. For the gang, there was no time or reason to clean up. Blood splattered boots, hands, pistols, clothes soaked, clinging, sticky as the sun climbed higher. And then the part that flips even hard stomachs. Anderson's men, Jesse among them, started mutilating the corpses, scalps, ears, noses, uniforms for trophies. This wasn't just killing. It was about sending a message in flesh and bone. The job was messy, slow, and brutal. knives slipping, skin tearing, blood pooling in matted grass. The metallic scent thick in the air, mixing with spent gunpowder and the ripe stench of wounds under the blazing sun. For Jesse, there was no fresh shirt or clean water to wash away what he'd done. Blood dried into the creases of his knuckles. The stains on his shirt stiffened, turned dark, impossible to hide or forget, and the day was only getting started. They hadn't even faced the Union relief column yet, just hours away, bringing another wave of violence, pain, and filth. Quick reality check for the Jesse James legend. Before he became America's most famous outlaw, he was already living where the line between man and butcher was written in blood. Sweat, gun smoke, and the sickening weight of mutilation. The movies never show what it's like to ride away in a shirt that smells like someone else's death, or how that stench sticks, no matter how far you run. But right there, after the massacre, Jesse and his gang faced their next nasty problem. What do you physically do after you've waded through all that gore? How do you eat, sleep, or even hold your pistol with hands caked in blood and skin burning from black powder? There was no time to mourn, barely time to breathe. Definitely no chance to get clean. The horror was just beginning. And unlike in the movies, there's no fade to black or overnight reset. The work didn't end with death. The sun kept climbing, heating up the blood-soaked grass, turning the field itself into a problem. Nearly 24 bodies twisted in heaps, uniforms ripped, faces slashed, hair hacked away. The ground was slick with blood and mud, thick as tar in some spots. Insects arrived instantly. Flies, wasps, even stray dogs nosing at the carnage. The stench got worse by the hour. Metallic at first, then sour, spoiled. The kind of smell you can't get out of your nose, even if you tie a bandana over your mouth. If all you know of the Civil War is old paintings or movies, you might think these men rode off into legend. Boots shining, pistols clean. Reality, Jesse and his fellow bushwhackers were stuck in a mess that clings tighter than guilt, hands swollen and raw, not just from the killing, but from scavenging. Because the dead didn't need boots, belts, or pistols, and the living needed whatever they could get. Murder, up close, is practical and ugly. At Centralia, it didn't get any uglier. For Jesse, the blood on his hands wasn't just from the fight. It dried in thick layers as he rifled through pockets still slick with what used to be someone's life. The pistols you pried loose were caked with gore. Knives got wiped on patches of grass, already stained dark. Some men laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that sounds thin and cracked. Like maybe if you joke about the stink, you can forget the shaking in your fingers. Here's a little detail nobody in the interviews ever brings up. How do you eat after this? Not in a week. Right then? How do you choke down anything with blood on your fingers, dried in your beard, splattered across your shirt? The answer, you don't wait for a wash. Most tried to ignore it. Some rubbed their hands in dirt. Others scraped them on tree bark or poured a little whiskey over their knuckles and pretended that counted as clean. It didn't. They ate anyway, hardtack or jerky, chewing with a taste of gunpowder and bile at the back of their throats. There's probably a dark joke in here somewhere about eating on the go, but let's just say you don't see the Jesse James legend talking about picking someone else's hair out from under your fingernails. Now pile on heat, exhaustion, and fear of pursuit. The Union relief train was coming, and everyone knew it. There was no time to wash, no clean clothes, hardly a chance to rest. If you're Jesse, your shirt is stiff with blood, boots so caked with mud and worse that every step squelched. The flies never left. They were on your hands, face, even in your food. There was no escaping the stink of what you'd done. It got into your scalp, your saddle, your blanket. Even the horses shied at the reek. And the violence wasn't over. That afternoon, Anderson's gang, Jesse riding with him, ambushed the Union column sent to take back Centralia. What happened wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. Close-range crossfire and tangled brush, blue uniforms collapsing, more bodies trampled into the dirt. More blood, more bodies, more flies, more heat. Another round of killing, another layer of mess Jesse couldn't wipe away. If you picked up a scratch or a cut, now infection was your next fear. No antiseptic, no soap, just sweat, blood, and a filthy rag if you were lucky. Nightfall didn't bring any relief. It just gave the men time to notice how their bodies were falling apart. Hands cracked and sore, skin itching under dried gore, clothes turning from blue or gray to a muddy, reeking brown. If you tried to sleep, the stink followed you. Men tossed and grunted on their blankets, boots still on, some too wired to rest, others so spent they collapsed in their filthy clothes. You might joke about the glamour of outlaw life, like how the movies never show Jesse James picking dried blood from under his nails, or biting into bread and getting a taste of someone else's misery. But the next morning, it was all the same. No wardrobe change, no hot coffee, just more stink, and the slow dread that the blood on your skin was only the start. Even if you rode 100 miles, the smell rode with you. That's the dirty secret of Centralia. The violence sticks, literally. No matter how fast or far you run, you're still wearing someone else's death. On your skin, your shirt, your gear, and halfway through, the worst is still ahead, because the legend can't hide the flies, the stains, or the fact that a teenage guerrilla never gets truly clean. There's a reason the Centralia massacre won't fade, not just in the history books, but in the bodies and minds of everyone who survived it. For Jesse James and the men beside him, the real aftermath was a physical sentence. Days of filth, wounds starting to fester, a stink no change of clothes could cover. The blood hardened into armor you never wanted. Every patch of skin it touched itched or burned. Every nick or scrape became a gamble with infection. And the flies? They became your new shadow, from the killing field to the campfire, over your hands as you tried to force down whatever stale food you could find. Even your water picked up the iron tang of everything you'd touched. If you were Jesse James in the week after Centralia, you didn't get clean. There was no cavalry camp, no hot bath, no fresh uniform. Maybe if you were lucky, a creek, but scrubbing just spread the stains. Some tried. Others gave up, let their shirts go stiff and their hair mat in sweat and blood. The stink wasn't just bad, it was a warning sign. At night, it filled your nose and crowded your dreams, so close you couldn't tell if it was the blood, the dirt, or the fear making you sick. And then, the fallout you can't see. Some men started trembling and never stopped. Others got meaner, quieter, more jumpy. The violence didn't just mark the dead. Every survivor carried a piece of that day under their skin. For Jesse, this was the start of a pattern. Violence, aftermath, numbness, a slow hardening that outlasted the war. Still a teenager, but the preacher's son from Clay County, he was gone. In his place, someone who'd learned just how easy it is to cross from ordinary to monster, and how hard it is to ever cross back. Outside Centralia, people tried to make sense of what happened. Newspapers called Anderson's men demons, monsters, sometimes even avenging angels. For Jesse, the story only got stranger. By the time he was robbing banks, the press was already building the legend. Jesse James, the dashing outlaw, Robin Hood of Missouri. There's poetry in the myth. But the real Jesse James, the one who rode away from Centralia, wasn't clean, wasn't noble, wasn't free of what he'd done. He was a teenager with blood under his fingernails, a gun that would never be fully clean, and a body marked forever by the stink and stain of his first massacre. That's the gap Hollywood almost never crosses. The movies love their outlaws, sharp and stylish, riding into sunsets with clean boots and daring poses. But the real outlaw life was built on the coppery stink of blood, the weight of mutilated bodies, and a filth you couldn't wash away. Jesse James didn't just survive violence, he became inseparable from it, carrying it out of Centralia and into every legend that followed. So next time you hear the name Jesse James, or see another glossy western about the legend of the outlaw, remember what's hidden under the hat and behind the gun. It's not just a myth. It's blood, stink, and pain that never goes away. That's the part of the story that sticks around, long after the smoke clears. If you want the stories Hollywood can't stomach, the real history, unsanitized and close to the bone, hit subscribe and come back for the dirt the legend always tries to scrub out.